My name doesn't matter. I'm 30 years old, and I spent 12 years stealing cars in Detroit. Everyone thinks car theft is about criminals and desperate junkies stripping vehicles for quick cash, but that's the first lie they want you to believe. The real money isn't on the streets. It's in the insurance claims, the fraudulent policies, the systematic destruction of assets for profit. I know because I watched my boss, a man who ran the most sophisticated chop shop operation in Michigan, literally bow his head and say yes sir to a man in a three-piece suit who runs one of America's largest auto insurance companies. Before I tell you how deep this fraud goes, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This story cost me everything: my freedom, my family, my city. The insurance industry doesn't want you to know what I'm about to expose. Subscribe now before this gets buried, because what you're about to hear isn't just my confession, it's the truth about who really profits from crime in America. I was born in 1994 in southwest Detroit, not far from the old Michigan Central Station, that abandoned train station that became the symbol of Detroit's collapse. My childhood was watching the city die in real time. Factories closing, houses abandoned, entire neighborhoods turning into graveyards of the American dream. My father worked at a GM plant until the layoffs in 2008. I was 14 when he lost his job. He never recovered, started drinking, stopped caring. By the time I was 16, he was gone, not dead, just absent, living somewhere else with someone else. My mother held us together, working 2 jobs. Gas station cashier during the day, overnight cleaning crew at an office building downtown. She worked herself to exhaustion for wages that barely covered rent on our small house near Clark Park. We weren't homeless, but we were always one emergency away from it. The constant stress aged her fast. I watched her go grey by 40. Detroit in the late 2000s wasn't a city, it was a warning. The automotive industry that built America was gutting itself, taking everyone down with it. People talk about the Great Recession like it was temporary. In Detroit it was permanent. Houses that sold for $100,000 in 2000 were worth $10,000 by 2010. You could buy entire blocks for the price of a used car. But in all that death, there was opportunity. When legitimate economy collapses, shadow economy expands. Detroit became a paradise for certain kinds of business. Scrap metal theft exploded. Copper wire stripped from abandoned buildings. Catalytic converters cut off parked cars in broad daylight. And car theft became an art form. I got into the game at 18, right after I dropped out of high school. What was the point of graduating? Detroit had no jobs for kids with diplomas. The auto plants weren't hiring. The city was bankrupt. Education promised a future that didn't exist. The streets promised immediate cash. I met Tommy at a house party in Mexican Town. He was older, mid-30s, always had money, always drove different cars. We got to talking about the Charger he was in that night. He saw I knew cars, I'd grown up around them, learned to fix them with my old man before he left. Tommy asked if I wanted to make real money. The way he said it, I knew what he meant. My first job was simple. Tommy pointed to a Honda Accord in a Home Depot parking lot. He gave me a Slim Jim and showed me how to unlock it. Took me 3 minutes. Heart pounding the whole time. But nobody stopped me, nobody cared. I drove that Accord to a garage in River Rouge where Tommy's people were waiting. They handed me $800 cash. $800 for 15 minutes of work. My mother made that much in 2 weeks. The math was simple and brutal. I kept doing it, got better at it. Learned to spot the easy targets, older model Hondas and Toyotas without modern security systems. learned which neighborhoods had police presence and which were essentially lawless. Learned to move fast, stay calm, never show fear. By 20, I wasn't just stealing cars, I was part of Tommy's crew. 5 of us working together, hitting different areas of Metro Detroit every night. We had it down to a science. Scout targets during the day, hit them at night, drive them to the chop shop, get paid. We were pulling in $4,000–5,000 a week each. For kids from Southwest Detroit with no prospects, that was fortune. The chop shop was where the real operation happened. It was a massive warehouse in Ecorse, right by the Detroit River. Inside, Tommy ran a full-scale automotive disassembly operation. Cars came in whole, left as parts. Engines, transmissions, doors, hoods, electronics, everything carefully removed, catalogued, and shipped across the country. Tommy had buyers everywhere. Body shops in Ohio, mechanics in Indiana, parts dealers in Pennsylvania. A stolen Escalade worth $60,000 whole could be parted out for $80,000. The profit margins were insane, and because the parts had VIN numbers removed or altered, they were nearly impossible to trace. I moved up in the organization quickly. By 23, I was Tommy's right hand. I managed crews, coordinated jobs, handled logistics. I wasn't just a thief anymore. I was management in a criminal enterprise that moved millions annually. Tommy ran his operation like a legitimate business. He had spreadsheets tracking inventory, databases of parts and buyers, even employee reviews. He talked about efficiency, profit margins, market demand. The only difference between Tommy and a Ford executive was that Tommy's supply chain started with theft instead of manufacturing. I thought Tommy was the top of the pyramid. He had money, power, respect in the criminal world. He owned property, drove expensive cars legally registered in other people's names, lived in a nice house in Grosse Pointe, pretending to be a legitimate car parts dealer. That illusion shattered in October 2022. I was 28. Tommy got a call that made his entire demeanor change. He went from relaxed to tense instantly. He told me we had a meeting in Dearborn, at a location he'd never taken me before. We drove to an office building near the Ford headquarters. Not a warehouse, not a chop shop, an actual corporate office building with marble lobby and security desk. Tommy's name was on a visitor list. We took an elevator to the 8th floor. The office we entered looked like any other executive suite. Expensive furniture, city view, corporate art on walls. Sitting behind a large desk was a man in his 60s. Perfectly groomed silver hair, expensive suit, American flag pin on his lapel. He looked like he should be on CNBC talking about quarterly earnings. This was Richard Stanton, CEO of Great Lakes Insurance Group, one of the largest auto insurance providers in the Midwest. His company insured millions of vehicles across 5 states. His face was on billboards, his voice in radio ads promising protection and peace of mind. He was a respected businessman, a pillar of Detroit's struggling business community, someone who testified before state legislature about insurance reform. Tommy walked into that office, and his entire energy shifted. The confidence evaporated. His shoulders dropped slightly. His voice got quieter, more deferential. He sat down across from Stanton without being invited, like an employee called to the principal's office. I stood near the door, trying to be invisible, but I could hear everything. Stanton wasn't yelling or threatening. He didn't need to. He spoke with the calm authority of someone who controlled the board. He had printouts, spreadsheets, reports. He knew our operation in detail better than I did, and I ran half of it. He talked about territory adjustments, about vehicle targeting. Apparently we were stealing too many low-value cars, not enough high-end vehicles. He mentioned specific makes and models, optimal insurance claim values, depreciation schedules. He knew which cars had the best parts markets, which thefts would generate the most profitable claims. Then it hit me. This wasn't a business meeting, this was a performance review. Tommy didn't work for himself. He worked for Stanton. The insurance CEO wasn't fighting car theft, he was running it. For the next hour, Stanton explained the business model with the detached professionalism of a corporate presentation. Great Lakes Insurance Group insured vehicles. When those vehicles were stolen, the company paid claims, but if the company also controlled the theft rings, they could manage the entire ecosystem. They could target specific vehicles that would generate profitable claims without excess payout. They could control where thefts happened to influence insurance rates in certain zip codes. They could deny legitimate claims while paying out their own staged thefts. The genius was in the deniability. Stanton had no direct connection to us. Tommy was the firewall. We were independent contractors as far as anyone could prove. But the targeting lists, the territories, the quotas, it all came from Stanton's actuarial team, dressed up as theft pattern analysis for law enforcement cooperation. Stanton's company publicly fought auto theft while privately causing it. They lobbied for stricter laws and higher penalties, then used those laws to justify raising premiums. They testified about the epidemic of car crime in Detroit while creating that epidemic. And they made billions in the process, premiums from millions of policyholders, payouts carefully controlled to maximize profit, and peace of the stolen parts market through Tommy's operation. I sat through that meeting in shock. Everything I thought I understood about our operation was wrong. We weren't outlaws, we were employees of a Fortune 500 company. Our crime wasn't theft, it was just unconventional vertical integration. 3 weeks after that meeting, Tommy called me for a private conversation. He looked stressed in a way I'd never seen. He had a list, 8 names, people in our crew who knew too much, who'd become liabilities, who might figure out what I'd just learned. The second name on that list made my blood go cold. Jake, my best friend since elementary school, the guy who got me into this business, the only person who still knew me before all this started. Jake and I went back to 3rd grade at Munger Elementary. We learned to ride bikes together on the cracked sidewalks of southwest Detroit. We survived middle school together when the neighborhood started getting really bad. When my dad left, Jake's family took me in for dinner 3 nights a week for almost a year. His mother treated me like a second son. Jake was the only person left in my life who remembered me before I became a criminal. Jake got into car theft the same way I did. Desperation and opportunity. He wasn't as high up in the organization as me. He ran a small crew hitting residential areas in the suburbs, targeting mid-range vehicles. He was reliable, loyal, good at his job. But Jake had started asking questions. He'd noticed the same patterns I had, the way certain vehicles got targeted, the way some stolen cars triggered insurance claims immediately while others took forever. The way Tommy seemed to have inside information about insurance response times. 2 weeks before the list, Jake had mentioned to me over beers that something didn't add up. He'd stolen a brand new Audi from a guy's driveway in Birmingham. Within 3 hours, the insurance company had already started the claim process. That was impossibly fast. He'd started wondering if someone was tipping them off, if maybe the insurance companies were somehow involved. That curiosity signed his death warrant. The morning after I saw that list, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Jake's name burned in my mind. I knew what happened to people on Tommy's lists. I'd helped dispose of some of them myself. But this was different. This was family. Tommy called me that afternoon. His voice had that flat quality that meant business. He explained it with cold logic. Jake had been flagged by Stanton's risk assessment team. Too curious, too smart, asking the wrong questions to the wrong people. The decision had come from the top. It needed to look like a deal gone wrong. Random street violence, nothing that would draw attention or raise questions about the larger operation. And because Jake and I were known to be best friends, because everyone in the crew knew we were like brothers, I was the one who had to handle it. If anyone else did it, people might suspect internal cleaning, might start asking their own questions. If I did it, it sent the message Tommy needed to send. The operation comes before everything. Before friendship, before loyalty, before history. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. This wasn't a request. In Tommy's world, in Stanton's world, nothing was a request. Refuse, and I'd be on tomorrow's list. They'd send someone else to handle both Jake and me. And they wouldn't just stop there. They'd go after anyone who might question 2 deaths in 2 days. Tommy handed me Jake's schedule. He'd been watching him for weeks, apparently. Jake always hit the gym on Thursday nights in Dearborn Heights, usually left around 9 when the place was nearly empty. I was supposed to make it look like a robbery, wrong place, wrong time, just another statistic in Detroit's crime numbers. The next 2 days were hell. I went through the motions, supervised some jobs, checked inventory at the chop shop, pretended everything was normal. But inside I was dying. I kept thinking about all the times Jake had my back. The time he took the blame for a theft I'd messed up when we were 19. The time he lent me money when my mother needed emergency dental work. The way he'd believed in me when nobody else did. Thursday night came. I found Jake at the gym parking lot exactly where Tommy said he'd be. He was loading his gym bag into his Honda, ironically a car we'd probably targeted 100 times, but Jake kept his because he'd paid cash for it and didn't want insurance. When he saw my car pull up, his face lit up. He walked over, all smiles, probably thinking we were meeting up for drinks. I suggested we go for a drive, told him I had something important to discuss, something about a big score. He was interested, always down for an opportunity. He got in my car without hesitation. Why would he be suspicious? I was his best friend, his brother. I drove toward the abandoned industrial area near Zug Island, where the old steel mills used to be. Miles of desolate post-industrial wasteland where nobody went at night. Jake started getting quiet. He wasn't stupid. He could read a situation. His hand moved subtly toward his waistband. He always carried. I pulled into an empty lot behind a shuttered factory, cut the engine. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The silence was crushing. Jake turned to look at me, and I saw it in his eyes. He knew, not the details maybe, but he knew something terrible was about to happen. And he knew I was the one who was going to do it. His face showed betrayal, confusion, hurt. He didn't reach for his gun. He could have. He was fast enough. But he didn't. He just looked at me with this expression that broke something fundamental inside me. Like he was disappointed in me, like I'd failed some test he didn't know he'd been giving me. I pulled my gun and fired 3 times. Professional, quick, the way I'd been trained. Center mass. Jake slumped against the door. Blood spread across his Detroit Pistons hoodie. His eyes stayed open for a few seconds, still looking at me with that same disappointed expression, before the light went out of them. I sat in that car for maybe 20 minutes, engine off, hands on the steering wheel, Jake's body cooling next to me. The smell of blood and gunpowder filled the car. My hands were steady. That was the most horrifying part. I'd just murdered my best friend, my brother, and my hands weren't even shaking. I'd become exactly the tool the system needed, efficient, emotionless, reliable. I disposed of the body in the Detroit River, same stretch where we used to fish as kids. Weighted him down with engine parts from the chop shop, poetic in the worst way. I watched Jake sink into the dark water and felt like I was watching my own humanity disappear with him. When I reported back to Tommy, he barely reacted. Just nodded, made a phone call, presumably to Stanton's people, confirming the situation was resolved. Then he handed me an envelope. $25,000. Premium pay for premium work, he said. Blood money for killing the only family I had left. That money sat in my apartment for a week. I couldn't touch it, couldn't look at it without seeing Jake's face. Finally, I took it to his mother. Told her Jake had borrowed money from me, that this was what he owed. She cried and hugged me, thanked me for being such a good friend to her son. I wanted to die in her arms. Jake's funeral was 4 days later. I stood in the back of the church while his mother wept over the casket. The priest talked about senseless violence, about how Detroit had lost another young man to street crime, about how we needed to do better as a community. I thought about Richard Stanton in his office tower, probably reviewing quarterly profits, not giving a single thought to the boy I'd put in the ground to protect his insurance fraud scheme. After the funeral, I couldn't unsee it anymore. The whole system became transparent. Over the next few weeks, I paid attention to everything with new eyes. I started understanding how the scheme really worked. Stanton's company would identify high-value vehicles in specific neighborhoods. They'd pass that information to Tommy through secure channels. We'd steal those cars on schedule. The owners would file claims. Stanton's company would pay out, but the amounts were carefully calculated. They'd lowball the claims just enough to stay profitable, blaming depreciation and market conditions. Meanwhile, the stolen cars went to our chop shop, got parted out and sold through Stanton's network of body shops and parts dealers, many of which were secretly owned by shell companies connected to Great Lakes Insurance. The genius was in the closed loop. Stanton collected premiums, paid controlled claims, and recovered the loss through parts sales. The theft itself was almost incidental, just a way to move inventory through the system. And Detroit, with its collapsed economy and overwhelmed police force, was the perfect testing ground. Nobody cared about car theft in a city that couldn't even keep its streetlights on. I realized I had a choice. Stay in Detroit and keep being a tool in Stanton's scheme until I became inconvenient like Jake, or run. Try to escape, build something different, maybe find some kind of redemption somewhere far from this corrupted city. Running meant leaving everything, my mother, my territory, my identity. But staying meant becoming more of a monster than I already was. More Jakes would need to be eliminated. More friends would be sacrificed for Stanton's profit margins. I started planning carefully. Over 5 months, I skimmed money from parts sales, small amounts attributed to buyer negotiations or shipping costs. I accumulated $75,000, hidden in a storage unit in Romulus under a fake name. I made contact with someone in Toledo who specialized in fake documents. Cost me $15,000 for a complete identity package, birth certificate, social security card, driver's license, work history. My new name was Michael Torres from Cleveland. I spent weeks memorizing his life story, practicing signatures, erasing myself piece by piece. The plan was to disappear during a parts delivery run to Ohio. These runs happened twice a month, took all day, involved minimal supervision. I'd just drive to Cleveland instead of coming back. Ditch the delivery truck, catch a bus to a different part of the city, vanish into a new identity. I set the date for March 20th, 2024. I'd been planning for 22 weeks, ever since Jake. Every day felt like walking on ice, knowing one wrong move would send me to the bottom of the river. 3 days before my planned escape, everything nearly collapsed. Tommy called an emergency meeting. Stanton's auditors had noticed discrepancies in parts inventory. Small amounts but consistent. Pattern analysis suggested internal theft. Everyone who handled money or parts would be audited within the week. My blood went cold. Professional forensic accountants would find my skimming easily. I had maybe 72 hours before they connected the dots to me. Couldn't wait for the 20th. Had to go immediately. That night, I loaded a stolen Malibu, one of our delivery vehicles, with my essential belongings. Fake documents, cash, one bag of clothes. I drove out of Detroit at 2 a.m., watching the city lights fade in my rearview mirror. The city that raised me, that destroyed me, that turned me into a killer. I was leaving it forever. I drove straight to Cleveland, 2.5 hours of paranoia and adrenaline. Every cop car made my heart race. Every toll booth felt like a trap. But I made it. Ditched the Malibu in a long-term airport parking lot. Took a taxi to a cheap motel in the Slavic Village neighborhood. I was 30 years old. I'd just erased my entire existence. Michael Torres was born in a Cleveland motel parking lot, carrying blood money and borrowed identity. For the first time in 12 years, I was free from Tommy's crew and Stanton's scheme. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Cleveland felt like another planet. Still Rust Belt, still Midwest, still suffering from the same industrial collapse that gutted Detroit, but it wasn't my ghost town. Nobody knew Michael Torres. Nobody knew what I'd done. I could breathe without constantly looking over my shoulder, at least at first. I found a basement apartment in Old Brooklyn, a working-class neighborhood with Polish and Hispanic families. The landlord took cash and barely glanced at my fake documents. $600 a month for a dim, damp space with water-stained ceiling tiles, but it was mine. My first clean address in over a decade. The paranoia was overwhelming initially. Every car that slowed down outside felt like Tommy's crew coming for me. Every knock on the door sent adrenaline spiking through my system. I slept maybe 3 hours a night, always with my gun under the pillow, always dressed in case I needed to run. The first 2 months were psychological torture, freedom that felt like a different kind of prison. But humans adapt. The brain can't maintain that level of alertness indefinitely. After 12 weeks, the panic attacks decreased in frequency. After 6 months, I could sleep through most nights. The hypervigilance never completely disappeared, but it became manageable background noise instead of deafening alarm. I needed legitimate work. The stolen money wouldn't last forever, and idle days meant too much time thinking about Jake, about the body count I'd contributed to, about the machine I'd served. I found a job at an auto parts store on Lorraine Avenue. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd gone from stealing cars to selling parts legally. But the work was honest. The paycheck had taxes deducted, and the owner didn't care about my fabricated work history as long as I showed up on time. The normality was intoxicating. Wake up, go to work, help customers find alternators and brake pads, come home tired, repeat. No violence, no stolen vehicles, no blood money. I was just another working stiff trying to survive in post-industrial America. The mundane routine was the most beautiful thing I'd ever experienced. I made strict rules for myself. No connections, no friendships, no relationships, nothing that could become leverage or liability if they ever found me. I was polite but distant with co-workers. I didn't go to bars after work. I didn't date. I was a ghost occupying a body. Visible but essentially not there. That strategy worked perfectly for 18 months. Then I met Rebecca. She came into the parts store one Saturday afternoon with a dying alternator from her Honda Civic. She was a nurse at Metro Health, coming off a night shift, exhausted and frustrated because her car had died in the parking lot. I helped her get the right part, offered to install it in the store's lot, since I had the tools, and 20 minutes before my shift ended. She was grateful. We talked while I worked. She was from Akron originally, moved to Cleveland for the nursing program, stayed because she liked the city's surprising resilience. She had an easy smile and genuine warmth that made lying to her feel particularly shameful. I fed her the Michael Torres story. Cleveland native, worked in auto parts his whole life, kept to himself but was trying to be more social. She asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime. Every survival instinct screamed at me to decline, to maintain distance, to protect both of us. But loneliness is its own kind of death, slow and suffocating. I'd been dying of it for so long I barely recognized how desperate I was for human connection. I said yes. That coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into regular dates. Within 8 months we were spending most of our time together. She was everything I wasn't, open, honest, uncomplicated by violence and guilt. She talked about small dreams, maybe buying a house in Tremont, traveling to see her sister in Portland, going back for her nurse practitioner degree. Normal dreams that normal people have. I fell in love with her gradually, quietly, like learning a new language. She made me believe Michael Torres could be real, that I could actually become someone other than the monster from Detroit. With her, redemption felt possible, instead of just a word. 2 years after arriving in Cleveland, Rebecca and I moved in together. A small house in Stockyards, nothing fancy, but it had a yard and a garage, and felt like a home. She talked constantly about the future, where we'd be in 5 years, what kind of wedding we'd want, maybe kids eventually, and I kept lying, kept building a life on sand, knowing the foundation was fake, but hoping maybe if I believed hard enough, it would become real. The reckoning came on a Wednesday morning, in April 2026. I was at the parts store, restocking brake fluid. My manager came back looking uncomfortable, said someone was asking for me at the front. Family emergency, they claimed. The ice-cold certainty hit immediately. I knew. I'd always known this moment would come eventually. I just didn't know when. I followed my manager to the front desk anyway, because running would only delay the inevitable and put Rebecca in danger. The man waiting wasn't Tommy. He was younger, early 30s, wearing a Carhartt jacket and work boots, like he belonged in Cleveland's industrial landscape. But his hands were too clean, his posture too confident. He was costume, not character. He gestured toward a black Suburban in the parking lot. I walked over mechanically, mind already racing through options that didn't exist. Inside the truck, he handed me a tablet showing photographs. The first was me leaving my house that morning with Rebecca. The second showed Rebecca at the hospital yesterday. The third was my mother in Detroit. She'd aged terribly in 2 years, looked 20 years older, coming out of a Kroger with groceries. The fourth made my stomach turn inside out. Jake's mother at her house in Detroit, completely unaware someone had photographed her through her kitchen window. They knew everything. They'd always known everything. My escape had been theater. They'd allowed me to perform. The man's voice was professionally neutral, like a corporate HR representative delivering bad news. Richard Stanton had been patient about my unauthorized departure. He understood employees sometimes needed sabbaticals to process difficult transitions. 26 months was generous, but vacation time was over. The operation needed experienced management back in Detroit. My particular skills were required for expansion into Cleveland's market. I had 72 hours to return to Detroit and report to a new facility in Dearborn. If I declined, they'd start with my mother, then Rebecca, then Jake's mother, who'd suffered enough losing her son without learning her son's best friend had murdered him. They had comprehensive files on everyone I'd ever cared about. Stanton's insurance company had access to databases and surveillance capabilities that made finding people trivially easy. The man assured me Stanton preferred cooperation over coercion. He was a businessman who understood incentives. Violence was expensive and drew attention. Much better when employees returned voluntarily after realizing their options were limited. Then he left, and I sat in that Suburban surrounded by photographic evidence of my failure. The pictures mocked me. Proof that freedom had never been real, that Michael Torres was just another role I'd played, that the life I'd built with Rebecca was constructed from lies they'd permitted me to tell. I could run again, take Rebecca, disappear deeper into America, maybe try Mexico. But they'd found me once in a city of 400,000 people. They'd find me again anywhere. And next time wouldn't be polite recruitment, it would be bodies and a message. I could go to police, try federal protection, but Stanton had connections everywhere: insurance fraud investigators, FBI financial crimes units, state attorneys general. Who would believe an admitted car thief and murderer over a Fortune 500 CEO with impeccable reputation and political connections across 3 states? The truth was simple and devastating. I had no moves left. Stanton had played this perfectly. He'd let me run specifically so I'd build something worth protecting. A man with nothing can't be controlled, but a man who has everything to lose becomes perfectly obedient. That night I told Rebecca I had a family emergency in Cleveland's suburbs. An aunt was sick, needed help with arrangements. I'd explain everything when I got back. She believed me because she loved me, and trust comes with love. She kissed me goodbye and told me to drive safe. I tasted the lie bitter on my tongue. I drove to Detroit the next morning. 2 more days wouldn't change anything, just prolong the agony of pretending I had choices. The facility in Dearborn was a legitimate-looking warehouse with Great Lakes Insurance Group signs outside. Inside, it was a sophisticated chop shop operation that made Tommy's setup look amateurish. Richard Stanton was waiting in an office that could have been in any corporate building. He didn't stand when I entered, just gestured to a chair with the casual authority of someone who'd never doubted his control over the situation. He explained my new role for an hour. I wouldn't be stealing cars anymore. That was ground-level work. I'd be operations coordinator for Great Lakes Insurance Group's Asset Recovery Division, the polite corporate name for the theft and fraud network. My job was managing multiple crews across Michigan and Ohio, coordinating targeting, ensuring optimal claim-to-part sale ratios, eliminating problems before they became liabilities. It was a promotion, from street thief to white-collar criminal, from worker to management. The pay would be excellent, $90,000 a year on paper as an insurance industry consultant, plus substantial off-books compensation. I'd have benefits, a 401k, respectability. Regarding Rebecca, my mother, Jake's mother, They'd remain safe as long as I performed. They were insurance policies, guarantees of my continued cooperation. I could visit Cleveland once a month. Under supervision, naturally. I'd watch my relationship with Rebecca deteriorate from enforced distance, but she'd stay alive and ignorant. Stanton welcomed me back to the team. My desk was on the second floor. I started Monday. That was 4 years ago. I'm 30 years old. I work for Great Lakes Insurance Group's Asset Recovery Division. On paper, I coordinate insurance fraud investigations. In reality, I run the fraud we're supposedly investigating. I wear business casual. I have a company email. To anyone watching, I'm a young professional in the insurance industry. Rebecca still lives in Cleveland. She doesn't understand why I can't move back, why I only visit once a month under mysterious circumstances, why everything changed. The relationship is dying slowly. She'll move on eventually, meet someone real, someone who deserves her. It will hurt, but at least she'll be alive. My mother still lives in Detroit, unaware how close she came to death, unaware her son is trapped in a criminal enterprise that's part of America's largest auto insurance company. Jake's mother still grieves her son, unaware his best friend murdered him for an insurance executive's profit margins. This confession is my only act of rebellion. I'm recording this on equipment Stanton doesn't control, uploading it through networks he doesn't monitor. When this goes live, I'll probably disappear, not escape, just vanish into whatever fate Stanton decides for loose ends. The car theft you see reported isn't random crime. It's coordinated insurance fraud on an industrial scale. Companies like Great Lakes Insurance Group profit from both sides, collecting premiums and orchestrating the thefts that justify raising those premiums. They target specific vehicles for optimal claim values. They control when and where thefts happen. They run the chop shops that part out the vehicles. It's closed-loop profit generation disguised as crime fighting. Richard Stanton will never face justice. He's too connected, too legitimate, too protected by the system he manipulates. He sits on insurance industry boards. He advises state legislatures on auto theft policy. He donates to politicians who write the laws that benefit his scheme. He's untouchable, and people like me, we're just tools. Disposable assets managed in spreadsheets. We take the risks, do the violence, face the consequences while executives like Stanton collect billions in profits and sleep peacefully in gated communities. If this story opened your eyes to how insurance fraud really works in America, subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell. Stanton and executives like him depend on silence, on everyone looking away, on crime being blamed on street thugs instead of the businessmen who orchestrate it. Your subscription matters. It's proof the truth can still reach people. Hit that like button too. Every like pushes this story to more people. The algorithm doesn't care about justice, but it responds to engagement. So engage. Make noise. Share this everywhere. Don't let it disappear. My freedom is gone. My life is over. But this truth is yours now. What you do with it determines whether Jake died for nothing or for something. My real name is Marcus Webb. I lied about that too. Michael Torres was just another mask. But this truth is real.